So I put a couple of things here that jumped through my head and I've seen over the years. And the first two on top there are really the key. So I think this is a statement that's pretty much clear right now, at least from what I see. I do a lot of recruitment, job interviews and such. Nobody wants to do desktop development anymore. Okay, that's not cool. Okay, everybody wants to be a web developer. And nowadays, web developers, they want to see stuff like you've heard thus far, big data, cloud, that kind of things. And what happens recently is that cloud is starting to catch up even with businesses who didn't want to hear about it in the first place. So nowadays, not having a cloud offer is a big disadvantage to your competition. People want to see, they don't want to use your cloud version, but they want to know that you have one. That means you're still up to date. You're still someone they should consider as a customer. And you need to have at least something that you can put the word cloud into. And we've seen a couple of variations of things that aren't really cloud applications, but at least they can stick the word there. And it's obviously up to you where you want to stop with this cloudification, let's say. Now, stuff that you might want to consider, there's going to be a cost, obviously, to doing that. So you're going to have to do some convincing of yourselves and probably your managers, or the other way around. Your managers know they want to do it, and now they want to convince you. So here's a bit of a few advantages of that. So first of all, you're not going to have to handle servers anymore. I don't know. Has anyone here handled servers directly? Been done sysadmin, that kind of stuff? There's one there. He should understand the pain. So you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to replace hard drives. You don't have to worry about failing servers and buying new ones just in time and having backups and that kind of stuff. Then obviously you put it in the cloud, it's natively cross-platform, or more, let's say the platform doesn't matter anymore. Okay, it's the platform of your choice. You just put it up there, and then it can be accessed from anything that has a browser, which is pretty much anything nowadays. Then with the cloud, obviously, comes a virtually unlimited number of resources. Okay, so you can make it as big as you want or as small as you want. You're not limited anymore to that. And also, the market expands. Right? If it's available there, it's publicly available. Anyone can access it. The whole world can use it potentially. And what comes after that? So once you've gotten into this part, you say, OK, let's consider this. Let's move on. There's some other stuff that's going to go through your head, especially if you're an engineer like I am. So, my God, was I waiting for this chance to finally rewrite that shitty piece of code that I had to maintain for like 20 years. And the other one is what goes into the management. So I also do some management at Axway, so I've had to think about both of these aspects. So you also have to think about, well, we've been working like this so far. I know it's not working. The company knows it's not working, but we've been doing it for so long. It's just the way it is. Now, this is the perfect opportunity that's going to force you to change that structure, the way you're working. It's going to bring up new positions, like DevOps engineers. It's going to bring up new technologies, new ways of working. You're not going to be able to do it the classical way. OK, so let's move on to the how. So obviously, you can, what I like to do and what I appreciate in a lot of engineers, let's just find a simple solution and we'll see about it later. Okay, so if we have to just add the word cloud to our offer, let's just think about some quick and dirty solutions first before starting to chop down our applications and start listening to microservices and all that kinds of new stuff that happens now. So I'm going to show you some of these potential options. But before that, the criterion, if it's not just adding the word cloud to your offer, the criterion you should be looking at to decide when to stop transforming that application to the cloud is obviously cost. Okay? Everything you get from the cloud is going to cost you. The more you want, the more resources. Storage is pretty much nothing. It's cents for gigabytes. But everything else you're going to use, services, compute power especially, is going to cost you, and it's going to cost you a lot. So the first thing you want to do with your applications is to look at how much resources is it eating right now. What's the minimum level of resources that it would need in order to operate properly? In terms of compute, so CPU and RAM. In terms of networking, does it need any specific DMZs or proxies or other kind of stuff like that? And storage. So there's a very good book that you could start looking at in terms of metrics and what kind of things you're going to find in the cloud that I advise you to look at. It's called Cloud Computing Patterns. And from that book, this is a very, good thing to start from. So what is the load to your application? Okay, you've decided you need this much CPU, RAM, this kind of a network, this much storage. Now, what is the typical load for your application? So the applications that you already have for your customers, okay? How are they being used? Do they have a more or less constant load? Okay, like this, so it really wavers very little around a median, in which case you're talking about a constant flow through your application. And in that case, you already have removed a lot of pains about elasticity especially, and load balancing, and a lot of other stuff that you would have to do to attain elasticity for your application. If your application has a load like this, just forget about elasticity. You don't need it. Then it's the other kinds of application which has regular but well-defined spikes in, like for example, the application that's frequently used every end of the month. Okay, it's about the same load every month towards the end. The rest is lower, and you have this kind of predictable workload. So that one you can also tackle statically. You don't need any elasticity, unless that brings too much costs compared to what you get from your customers. Okay, but in most cases, you should be able to handle it with static if the sinusoid here is not too large. Then you have the first case where you can't get away with it anymore. Okay, so this is the unpredictable spikes. It's like Christmas. You're selling products. It's going to be you can't predict what's going to happen. You may have 10 customers today and 10 million tomorrow. It's just impossible to predict. So in that case, elasticity is no longer an option. With static, no matter how big you're going to make it, it's still you still risk that you're going to lose orders, or the service will not be available. And then the last one is usually what happens is totally erratic. That shouldn't happen, but there are applications where it does. So with the unerratic kind, it's more or less like the other one. Maybe you're going to get away with it if you can. If it's Christmas-based shopping, then you can leave it to static for most of the year and only scale it towards Christmas. But if it's something that's really unpredictable, again, there's nothing you can do. You have to do some elasticity. You have to scale it. And this one is for startups, more or less. Or maybe even for you, when you put your new application or your existing application in the cloud, it's pretty much, if it's going to have a success, and that's what you're going for. So if you won't have success, no bother talking about it. But if you will have success, it's probably going to look like this. It's going to be quickly going up. And one thing that is true right now for mobile apps, but even for any other cloud apps, if a customer will start using your application, it fails the first day, he's not going to use it the second time. He just won't. There's plenty of others. Why should he pick you? So you have to be prepared to scale compared to how successful your application is. Okay? Good. So you have to look at this. You have to do some, if you haven't done a capacity planning for your product, do it. Okay? And if you haven't taken any metrics to see how your application is used, do it and try to fit it in a pattern. It will give you a sense of where you need to get, how much it's going to cost you, and how many modifications you're going to have to do to your application to stick within budget. So if you're lucky enough, you're going to be able to stick to one of these quick and dirty solutions, from which the simplest one that I've seen sold as cloud application is you keep your own application. It's just the same application. You just put the database up in the cloud. Okay? It's possible. It's directly usable. Don't expect this is going to be, just use that the database in the cloud is going to work. It's probably not. Okay? The databases that they have up in the cloud that they scale elastically, that you can pay as a service for, they're much reduced in functionality compared to what you're used to for your normal server. Okay? You're not going to have as much, especially on the procedural part, you're not going to have as much syntax sugar you can use. It's not the same thing. Okay? But you can get there much faster than what would come next if you can't do this. So that's the first thing you can do. And the other thing you can do, is the other obvious thing. Just put this monster up in a virtual machine up in the cloud and RDP into it. Right? It's what we do every day. Okay? This is probably going to work for very few people, but there are cases where it might work. Why not? There's also more, well, streaming technology is much more interesting than RDP that you can probably look at. You know, but I just put this because it's popular. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. All right, so we have a capacity planning. We have more or less an understanding of how our application is used, what a load of it is. We've looked through these, and I strongly advise you, if you think they have a chance, start with this, start small. Don't start from the beginning to chop it off and make services and whatever. Then, the next option, you can't do without at least a minimal separation. So you're going to have to break down the UI from it. Obviously, if you can't RDP into it, you have to break down the UI from the rest of it. The database, you have to move out of it anyways, sooner or later. And then you have the decision of where you're going to put this piece in the middle, right? So if you keep your desktop, if it were a desktop application, this can still be on the ground, so it can be on the workstation. Although with the desktop technologies that probably everyone's using, it's not going to be very easy to separate a desktop UI from the rest of this. At least part of it will go with the UI. But you find your own solution. But usually you're going to start doing this as a web, using your service layer that you already have, which you will have to enrich, obviously, with the database. And this one, you can either put it, right now you have the 3 tiers, right? Okay. So you're probably going to put this in an application server. You have your database. Hopefully, you will collocate these two so you don't pay Amazon or whoever you're going to use money that you don't want to be using. So pay attention there. All the data that stays in the same cloud, you're not paying anything for it. The moment a byte of data goes out of the cloud, you're paying for it. Okay, so if you transfer data to upload to a cloud, download from a cloud, that's going to cost you. It doesn't come for free. Okay, if you stay within the same cloud, within Amazon, within Google, or whatever you want to use, you're not paying for it. So you're going to have to collocate this if you put them both up in the cloud. And you still have this piece that you're going to have to decide where you put it. So this might work if your application doesn't require too much resources, or if your customers are paying you an insane amount of money, which you can afford it. But for most businesses where you have, you use, and even for cloud itself as in use, you're going to have to put a price tag on it that's ridiculously small. Okay, that's how cloud applications work. You see all the websites. Here, try out new application. What does it cost me? $2 a month. Really? Okay, let's use it. If you're going to say it's $200,000 and only for enterprise, nobody's going to look at it. So if it's already okay, you're within budget with this breakdown here, stop there. But probably sooner or later, you're going to have to break down more. So that's where we start thinking about more or less, well, let's not say microservice. It says microservice there because they came up with the concept, but service-oriented architecture anyway. So you're going to have to break the big box in the middle into smaller services. And the way you're going to do that is not on technical grounds. It has to be on functional grounds. Otherwise, you haven't done anything. You just broke a big ball of mud into 5 balls of mud, but together they're the same thing. You have to break it by functionality so that you can scale independently one functionality compared to the other. That's where you gain in cost. Okay? If a customer uses today only this piece of the application, you only scale this one. The rest stays tiny. With the big ball of mud from before, you didn't have a choice. Okay? If you have to scale the whole thing, the whole feature set. Okay? And that's going to cost you things that are not used. So that's why you start breaking this thing down by feature groups. So you normally should have feature this, service that, all combined together, that can scale independently. So how do you do that? You're going to have to break it down. So you won't break it all down at the beginning. Now, if you were able to do that in a responsible fashion, you would have done it already probably. Okay? You'd have refactored your application. You know already it doesn't work. You can't refactor the whole application. So a way to do this is using the strangler pattern. Okay, you can look it up. It's a term that was coined by Martin Fowler. And this is the way it would look like. So you're going to have your big app there. If you've broken it already down into 3 pieces, like we said before, it's going to look different from this, but you're going to have to add the same things. So first of all, you're going to have to add a gateway in between the UI and your backend, okay? Because you're going to want to use some features from that old applications that you haven't had time to rewrite, and at the same time reroute features that you've rewritten to your new services. That's the point of the gateway, okay? And these pieces here are, if you're out of luck and it's very difficult to separate these services, and it takes too long to separate one service out of it, and you have to go smaller. Let's take these 5 functions first, and then the next 5 functions, and so on. So at the code level, then you have to use such facades. So you have to use like circuit breakers. You put the circuit in one end of the function, and at the other end of the function, and you rewrite just that function or group of functions. Okay, these serve precisely that purpose. So they will, from the code, you will call the service. Then when it has the callback, it will continue in the code in the old application. And obviously, with all of this, as you scale and you have more and more services, you're going to have some infrastructure. Okay, that's where DevOps becomes important. You're going to need a service registry, so all these small pieces can find each other and operate without someone manually doing it all the time. You're going to need a configuration server to easily configure the entire system that's now made up of 10,000 programs instead of one single program. You're going to need monitoring, a lot of monitoring, and that's really a big subject when it comes to this, because you'll be looking at basically distributed system all the time, even if you started with just one app. And that's your start. Now, in breaking this down, there are a few very critical points, let's say. One of them is data. So you have foreign keys that you have to break, in which case you're going to have to use the concept of HTOS. So instead of having foreign keys, you have API calls. So you store, instead of the foreign keys, you store the URL of the related table. You're going to have the part where you have shared data. So the same table from the database is used by multiple services, in which case you're going to have to create a new service for that particular table. And you also have to think about transactions. With this kind of things, you don't have the transactions anymore. If one fails, it won't roll back everything. It will just roll back that particular service data. Okay, so you're going to either have to invent a transaction manager, which I only advise you to do if it's absolutely necessary. But for most cases, you're going to have to deal with eventual consistency, and that's a whole different beast. Then the UIs themselves, you're going to have to handle them as well. There's a pattern that I'll let you look at, backends for frontends. It says your services through that should have a separate gateway for the different UIs you need to expose. So if the application is consumed by mobile, you have one gateway, the actual customer UI is another one, the admin UI in another one. All right, so just keep in mind along this way that your organization will have to change. I think you've seen this before with Conway. If your organization works the way it does now, it continues to work like that, you won't be able to break it down. And also, this is not a new problem, okay? You should be pretty happy about that. You're not trying to solve a new problem. People have done it before. It's doable. They've been trying to do this in 1963, okay? There's a lot of solutions to this. Just go ahead and you'll get there. Thanks a lot.